folks. Welcome back to the Biz World channel, the AMBC network, iHealth Radio, the iHealth channel, the works. Today we're going to cover a favorite topic of mine, which is leadership and empowerment and executive decisions and all the things that come with, the topic of leading and business and the mental stress and all the stuff with an expert who is actually a transformational leadership coach. Her job is, and her passion is to empower executives and founders to lead with authenticity, conviction, and confidence. So basically, they can have a better positive impact on their lives and organizations or communities they serve. And I'm going to leave it at that. So with that being said, I'd like to bring up, Andrea Johnson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Hurricane. That's quite an introduction. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, do I do all that?
Yeah, you do more.
Probably, actually, you're right. I do a lot more.
Well, listen, I mean, that's quite impressive stuff. It's leadership as just as a word is sometimes misconstrued. And, I mean, we know what that means, but do we really know what that means? And unless someone is actually in a leadership role, they might not know what it takes to be in those shoes. And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of responsibilities, accountability. And there's more to that. And it comes with a mental toll. It comes with, obviously you're in charge of things and people and revenue and, it's a lot of stuff. But before we get into all that real deep stuff, let's talk about Andrea and her story that got her into this. Now, I know you're international in a way, so let's go there.
Okay. Well, I was born in Southeast Texas, but I was raised in Seoul, Korea. So that's a big jump. My parents were missionaries, and I actually moved I had 17 different homes between being born and 21. So by the time I was 21 years old, I'd lived in 17 different places. Now, some of those were different homes within the same area, but my dad was a preacher. So we moved from Texas to Wyoming for a while, and then we went to Korea. And so I spent all of my formative years in Seoul, Korea. And I, to this day, watch K-dramas for my lunch. And that's my reward for getting the hard things done. And I just, it gave me an understanding of and a way to be able to perceive things and to look at things from different perspectives. I went to school with kids from 65 different countries at an international school, and my mother worked with the International Red Cross, so she would take trips to Geneva. And so for me, being international is normal. And having lived in the United States a lot longer now than I lived there, it feels a little odd. I feel like I need to be out. I need to go travel.
Well, thank you, Andrea. That's pretty impressive. Do I assume that you speak a little Korean or good Korean or fluent Korean?
조금만 알아요. And I have, so the thing is, one of the things I've learned going back into listening to these K-dramas is that it is a really interesting language. And I already knew this, but it uses a lot of the same words in very different ways. And my parents took 2 years of language school when they went. It's the second hardest language for English speaking people to learn. And it's got a very simple alphabet. It's these little squares, and you see it's just really simple. But when there's all the nuances that go into it, plus this little peninsula has been overrun by the Chinese, the Japanese, the Mongolians. I mean, just all of it. So especially if you don't know how to read Chinese characters, if you don't speak any Japanese at all, you can't read a newspaper, you can't do any of that. But listening to them speak on these TV shows has reminded me how much I do know, but just knowing that 없어요 means I don't have, you have to put that in the sentence, and that you have to know what they're saying they don't have. It could be they don't remember your name. It could be I don't have any ramen or kimchi. No, I do not speak it fluently. Even my parents, my dad still speaks quite a bit, but none of us speak it fluently. You have to be totally immersed in the culture.
Well, listen, I can't judge, right? I mean, you've lived there long enough. I mean, some people, pick up about 17 years is quite a bit, but here's the thing, though. You're right. A lot of languages are very difficult, and you can't just pick up, overnight. And even if you did, it could be difficult, especially as a second language. And that's one of the difficult ones. I mean, I know there's plenty of them out there. some people complain about French and Spanish. I mean, I think Korean will be much higher there in that rank of difficult languages to learn.
Well, the weird thing is, I took Spanish in high school because I knew I was coming back to Texas. And I thought, well, I'm going to need Spanish. Well, have I ever used my Spanish? Nope. I've never needed to use it in my job. I've never needed to use it in my culture, in my neighborhood. But then I went to work in medical research. Guess what I needed to use?
Spanish.
Korean.
Oh, Korean.
Korean.
Okay. Oh, wow. All right. Well, sounds
Korean
good.
or Chinese. And of course, I don't speak any Chinese other than, like hello. But I discovered I needed to learn how to speak Korean because a lot of the researchers that are in a lot of these medical institutions, they're from a lot of these Asian countries. And so Korea has really, when we were there in the 70s and 80s, it was not quite the powerhouse it is today. And this is all before the Olympics that they had there. And so now it is just technologically
Way advanced.
way advanced. And I watch some of these things. I'm like, golly, I wish I had that on my house. And, now to get that on my house would be really expensive. It'd be like a smart house, and all of them have it. Even the little bitty tiny apartments have all that smart house stuff. But um,
Well, you got to
anyway,
give it to them. I mean, you're talking about Korea, Japan. I mean, some of the tech that they have there. I mean, they're just way. I mean, they call them like for example, Japan. They call it Planet Japan. I mean,
yeah,
they're just basically live on their own planet with everything they have. Their lights are different. The way they live is different.
yeah,
The way they interact is different. The way they're even sanitation is different. I mean, everything's different there. I mean, it's just amazing as a
sure.
culture, and
Well,
but
I
you're
will
right.
say this. I will say this. Growing up overseas gave me the ability to have an Eastern mindset instead of a Western mindset. It felt odd for me, and I fought it for a long time when I came back for college, and because I wanted to fit in really bad. And this is where a lot of our problems come in when we try to fit in rather than be ourselves. And we talk about this with leaders. We talk about this in just even our families. But I tried to be in a sorority. I tried to do all these things that were very Western. And it wasn't until I hit like 45, 50 that I just realized, hang on, I don't even think that way. I think this way. Why do I need to worry about that? The way that they revere their elders, the way that they care for their community, even you mentioned sanitation, everybody like composts on their counter and because they have a small space with a lot of people and it's a necessity for them to do things that way. But then it turns out that they have this amazing love and dedication to the land and making sure that trees flourish and making sure that they have green space. And I think, oh, we've here on this giant continent have gotten lazy because we just think we can just move a little bit and get the greener pastures. It's like I have 3/4 of an acre here in Virginia and I have big trees around it. It's like it's a lot of work, but it's green, you know. And so I think that being able to take those kinds of things, some of them were difficult, some of them were just really mind blowing. And some of the things I learned now I can see how they benefit me where I am. They benefit me in the ability to kind of see things holistically, to be able to work with teams in a way that gives me a higher level view and to help others see things from a different perspective. So I look back on it now and I'm very grateful for it.
Thank you for sharing that. And it is a fascinating culture as a whole. I mean, all those countries have a unique, level of respect. I mean, I'm close to it to a degree because I've been in martial arts all my life, which means it is, we have the same traditions and it's part of your day-to-day life, whether the respect for your sensei or your dojo and all the stuff. And,
Yeah.
there's a whole different level of, I guess, even spirituality. It's kind of all tangled in. And you're right. There's respect for the elderly, for the ranking, folks and of leadership. It's different how we see it. And you mentioned you have an Eastern mindset versus a Western mindset. And we are two different cultures. I mean, literally, when you're
Yep.
looking at how, and the further east you go, the further, the more of that you'll find, and the more west you go, I guess, the least of that you'll find. And it's interesting because even work ethics are different, and I'm sure you
Hmm.
tackle that in your transformational coaching, because that's a whole different thing. I mean, I can tell you this true fact. All my teams, and I loved every single person that I've ever had on my team. I don't think I've had any problem with anyone, even those that we might not have had performance, we had performance concerns, still had a great relationship. But I can tell you this, the one type of team that I've always had that actually I had the least problems with, and the least instructions that you give, and the least concerned or like hand holding type that that you have to was actually my Asian initiative teams. They were basically they train, they follow, you tell them what they need to be doing, and they just do it. You don't have to worry about the quality, the quantity, the processing, everything. And especially when we're talking about like in sales, it's enrollments
Mm.
and applications and forms and filling this and
Hmm.
submissions and all stuff. They do it. I mean, they do it with the highest level of perfectionism, if you want to call it that way. And it's amazing. I've used that example many times, but it is just and it comes from that culture of
Hmm.
discipline and respect, and
Right.
it's just a whole different approach. So we can tackle a lot of that stuff and get into deeper into the discussion. Now, I was reading about you were navigating some wellness and health issues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you care to expand on that? Just
Oh,
very
sure. I don't mind telling. A lot of times when we tell our stories, Hurricane, it really helps other people. And we're always surprised, I think, when we tell something that we think is kind of normal for us and other people go, "Oh, I needed to hear that," you know? So I'm happy to share. When I talk about navigating physical and mental wellness, I mentioned that growing up, there were things that were hard. I was in Korea in the 70s and 80s, and it was kind of the height of, I guess you would call the Cold War between the North and the South. And so there were tunnels being dug underneath the DMZ. There were spy ships being, sunk off the coast. And if you look up the 70s and 80s, what was going on in between the North and the South on that republic, I mean, on that peninsula between the Republic and the Democratic People's Republic, you will see things like American soldiers being hatcheted in the DMZ. You will see things like the assassination attempt on the president, and they got his wife. When we moved there in '74, it was a curfew from midnight to 4 a.m., and there were tanks that rolled down the street. They put up barbed wire, the little
wow.
giant, like jacks that you throw, those big, I forget what they're called, like tank traps or whatever, with the big, and things like my dad getting kidney stone, and our missionary friends had to take him in the middle of the night. They turned the lights off on the car to go around the barricades and stuff to get him to the hospital. And I woke up in a house with just me and my sister, and our neighbor next door came. I mean, it's just, there was a lot of what felt, and we were safe reality, but it felt like insecurity. It felt unsafe. It was so foreign to me. We moved when I was 7. And of course it was foreign, but it was just so different. And over there on the mission field, every single other missionary, no matter what denomination they're with, like if they're Presbyterian or Baptist or Catholic or whatever, they're all aunt and uncle because we leave our families behind. So I developed this love for community that I kind of latched onto, but I still didn't feel safe. And the one way that I could soothe myself was with food. So probably,
All right.
yeah, and that's a safe way, right? That's like I didn't because drugs are not, I mean, you can still go into a pharmacy and get whatever you need. There was no drinking age at the time. My friends were happy to enjoy that. And I just was a good girl, I didn't. And so what I did do was I hid food and I snuck food and I binged on food. And we had, this was back before, again, the technological advances. So we took canned goods, we took non-perishables, and so I would pull like jars of peanut butter and just keep it under my desk and just eat peanut butter whenever I needed it. And but my family is kind of prone to obesity. And so I showed that at an early age as well. And my mother would send me to school with a half a tuna sandwich and mustard, half a tuna and mustard sandwich, a tab and a boiled egg.
I,
Doesn't even cut it. And so I did what a lot of kids have done is I stole money from my mom and I bought ramen, because we had these Korean ladies who cooked for us and oh,
mm.
talk about some good ramen and some really good mandu. And I'm not a kimchi eater, but just some really good Korean food available at lunch. So I would do that. So I would eat what my mom would send with me, and then I would still eat other stuff. So I developed bulimia at an early age, and I put myself in the hospital for bulimia and depression, and I turned 20 in the hospital on a 12-week inpatient program. So, but you know what? That was the first time that someone said to me, this was a hard life for you. I mean, we hadn't been in Korea 3 weeks before we watched an American helicopter get shot down. because they flew inside the circle around the what they call theirs is the blue house instead of the White House. They had the blue house. And so, things like that were just very unsettling to a child. And so that's how I coped. And so I've spent the rest of my life learning how to manage all of that. I still to this day, I'm 57. So to this day, I still know there are times when I need to have some crackers in the house because I need something. It's a tactile thing. Um, but I also ended up having gastric bypass surgery 19 years ago, 2005. I was at 310 pounds. I am 5'1" and a half, okay, with a size 4.5 ring. And I weighed 310 pounds. And I went up and down and up and down. And finally, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I said, I work in the oncology center. I know what kind of cancer um, probabilities that are associated with obesity, especially morbid obesity, which at 310 pounds, I was morbidly obese. And so I said, I'm going to do this. And my husband said, okay. And I was 38 or 30, wait, 19 years ago. So I was 38. Yes. I don't do math. That's one thing I don't do.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's
You and
of all
many.
the things that I do, I don't do math. So it's like, that's my one free pass. But I decided that we've been married 12 years at the time and hadn't been able to get pregnant. And so I did all my research because I worked in clinical research and I knew exactly how to research everything. And so I did.
It's powerful.
And yeah, I mean, I knew exactly which journals to go to, which articles to go to. I knew all of that. And so I had gastric bypass surgery in 2005. And then about 3 years later, I was sitting across the desk from a gentleman in a white coat who said, yeah, you're in pre-early menopause. Your eggs are old and you have about a 13% chance of getting pregnant, of a live birth. That's the way he said it. You have a 13% chance of a live birth, even with in vitro fertilization. And I'm like, that is not even remotely a benign possible, it's like, that's not a benign process. So by the time we got out to the car, I looked at my husband and I said, adoption's 100%. I said,
Wow.
why can't we do that? I grew up around, and when I look back on my life, I think I was prepared for that situation because I grew up, probably 50% of my friends in my close friend group were adopted. And so, it's like those kinds of things. My mother had breast cancer. We lost her in 2017. So navigating all of those things. And there was 7 years of counseling, antidepressants, navigating all of that. And that's the word I use because there's no way that just, you can't meet all of that stuff just head on. You have to figure out ways through and around, and you're going to hit roadblock after roadblock. And we did with gastric bypass, we did with adoption, and navigating all of that gave me a whole lot of muscle when it comes to figuring things out. It gave me a whole lot of muscle when it comes to being resilient and finally saying, you know what? I can do this. And so that's when I say navigating some of those things, that's what I'm talking about.
Like this is gonna take longer than an hour, I have to say. There's quite a bit here, and I mean, hearing your story and really like how it all started and the experiences overseas, I mean, culturally and all stuff. But you're right, you were in the middle of a super conflict. I mean, it's still there, but it's not as high as it was at that time. And a lot of conflicts were around the world. I mean, we do have a few now, but that you were at an age where all that stuff is super, right? And you got through that stuff, and you there were some ramifications that actually impacted your health, and eventually,
Mm-hmm.
those things lingered with you over time. But I do have to say, listening to you today and, just watching you and the energy that you have, someone could never stay or think that you've gone through all these things. And
Mm.
again, there's a lot of resilience in there. I think that's something you've grown to be, strong at. And frankly, you said it, that's real life. I mean, everyone watching or listening, maybe not the same circumstances, but everybody's going to have their own set of hurdles, and some in the health, some in the family, some in the environment. All stuff can happen to each and every one of us. Some financial. at the end of the day, it's how you deal with them, and you have to kind of adapt to the circumstances and situations, and kind of navigate, as you said, around and find solutions. And you did. I mean,
Hmm.
you there were certain things you cannot do, but there was always alternative
Hmm.
options, and you picked whatever you could to make it work, and you did. And I think that's a big message to audiences because no matter where you are, what culture, what's your socioeconomics, whatever you are in the world, these things are real. It's part of
Mm.
life, and there is no one that can go through this life with zero, I guess, stories
Hardship.
or,
Yeah.
or challenges. Challenges are part of this. It is part of it's a. I always say this life is a test run. I mean, you go in from the beginning to the end. It is a test, and in the test, you're going to get a little bit of, hurdles and obstacles and challenges. And it's just like how you're going to navigate. Now, from a religious aspect too, and that helps your faith,
Hmm.
your beliefs, all that stuff can help you navigate better. I mean, people would believe tend to
Hmm.
do better than people that may not have,
Hmm.
and eventually some people find faith because of those challenges. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes you would think that that's made on purpose just so we can turn back and say, hey, oh God, and whatever denomination here, it's appropriate because I think we all kind of know that there is, a level of divinity that we need to search for and
Hmm.
actually go back. And then this is not a religious show, folks, but all these things do help. I mean, your educational stuff, that's good. You can learn the science and everything. But if you lose faith, if you lose hope, if you lose all these things, you might not be able to navigate. And unfortunately, sometimes that gets a mental toll on people. And
Mm.
certainly, a lot of people sometimes they go extreme, right? And so, but you've prevailed, and not only that, you've been using some of this stuff now in your work, in your life, and it made you stronger. You know what they say, right? What doesn't kill make you stronger. I mean, you are as strong as you can get, and that's really powerful stuff. And I'm sure you use some of these things in your
Mhm.
work, and then you also said it. I mean, you've done some research. You've done probably the best research out there with some of the big, I guess, school types of universities and in
Mm.
medicine university, medical universities. And so there's a lot of work there. So that also gives you resilience and things. Now let's talk about your transition into the role of leadership coaching and stuff. How did that happen?
Well, you just mentioned universities. I spent, like I said, 11 and a half years at Johns Hopkins, 11 and a half years at University of Virginia, and I kind of rose through the ranks. I started off as an administrative assistant, and I learned research administration and all the NIH guidelines and all the budgets and all that stuff. And I worked my way into operations and management and realized pretty early on that I wasn't interested in managing because the definition of managing is keeping the status quo. And that's just not who I am. I am a pot stirrer. I am a let's make it better. I'm all about, I mean, my dad always taught me, Hurricane, you leave it better than you found it, right? So from day one, I was taught you don't just go in and make sure things stay the same. I mean, that's just not, not built that way. And so I was consistently looking and getting consistently frustrated. And back in that 12-week inpatient program, was the first time somebody said to me, you actually have the ability to change your circumstances. And I'm like, I have what? And it was the very first time somebody started asking me about critical thinking skills and figuring out what my dreams might be and how I wanted to move in the world. And then when I met my husband in grad school. I have almost a master's of divinity. But one of the things that I was good at and still am good at is planning. And I used a Franklin Planner system. You remember Franklin Planner? I don't know if you've ever used theirs, but Steve Covey had just taken over, and I read his book. And at the back of the book, it had an exercise where I was supposed to do my governing values. This is my governing values from 1995, and they're laminated with packing tape. Okay, so
Wow.
whatever we have to do,
It
but it
works.
was. If it works and it's still here, right? So it's older than my marriage, and my marriage is 29 this month. So I know that the packing tape is good stuff. Anyway, being able to consistently go back to this and say, what are my governing values? Why am I doing this? What do I want to do? When I hire people, I say, this is a launch pad for you. This is not a landing pad. And then I train them and I help them get a better job. And I'm thrilled and they're thrilled. And the chief of the department or the division comes to me and says, what did you do? Why did they leave? And I'm like, I was doing my job. He says, no, you weren't, because they want things to stay the same, right? And there's a certain amount of that that makes complete sense when you're in a medical institution where you need like institutional memory and you need people who can be consistent and make sure everything is running like it's supposed to. Because even though you're not on the patient care side, there's still the patient care side. And I just got to the place where I told my husband one night I was watching a show that it's called Kevin Probably Saves the World. I don't know if you remember, but it was out for like 1 or 2 seasons. It was John Ritter's son. And he was like the only righteous person left on earth. And he was called to help people. And I just looked at my husband. I said, I just want to help people. Can that be a job description? And he looked at me and he goes, well, my husband's a pastor. And he goes, don't we already help people? I said, not like that. I want to do it different. And so I just kind of started looking. And a friend of mine I'd known since I was 17 said, you really should look into John Maxwell. And I'm like, what for? And I really didn't know much about John Maxwell. My husband had read a couple of his books, and I had done a lot of personal growth and leadership training for myself. But I had not, I had been through a couple of programs, but I had never actually done any John Maxwell stuff. And so I started looking into it at the time, 5 years ago. It was the John Maxwell team. Now it's the Maxwell leadership team. And I looked at it, I said, you know what, this might work for me. And so I got certified as a DISC consultant, speaker, trainer, and coach. So I'm licensed to not only administer DISC and all of the stuff that goes with that behavioral analysis tool, but I'm also licensed to teach and do masterminds and workshops with John Maxwell's books. And I'm doing a conference of his, a Live to Lead conference. You could actually look that up and see they happen every fall. And I've got one happening here in Charlottesville. But when I decided to do that, I thought I can do this stuff while I'm still working. And so for the first 2 years, I did some mastermind groups and I tried to pull it out, tried to offer it. But here's the thing. They didn't want it. They just didn't want it. So finally, and I was ready and I was prepared. I even did a lot. This was during COVID. And so I got all my team off grounds and I did a lot of work. Kind of, even the department COO was all about, Andrea, give us some encouragement for like, this is the largest department in the university other than facilities management. This is Department of Medicine. So I gave leadership encouragement, like emails on a regular basis through about the first half of being off grounds for COVID. But it got to the place where it's like, but we still just need, don't ruffle any feathers, don't put any changes in place. I'm like, but that's what I'm doing. It's like I'm laying the groundwork to help you change. And they're like, but we don't really want to change. I mean, they didn't say this out loud, right? But that was really the message that came across. And so 2.5 years ago, I just told my husband, I said, that's it. Some things went down, and I said, that's all, and I'm done. And I know our finances aren't exactly where they want to be, but I'm out. And I went solo at that point and have been on my own ever since. And last fall, they asked me to come back and do a kickoff workshop for the research administrators training that all these people I used to work with for core values, which is what I do now. That's my main signature piece. And I said, wow, this is full circle. The University of Virginia is paying me 5 times what they paid me as an employee to come back and do a 2-hour workshop. Not 5 times total for a year, 5 times
Oh,
per,
yeah,
per hourly
I
rate,
know. Yeah, yeah.
5 times per hour, and so it felt really good, but it also helped me realize, and doing all this work and getting to where I am helped me realize that I just was never really meant to be in that kind of an environment. I was meant to be doing something else. And there are days, hurricane, we look back and we say, why did it take me so long to get here? But I didn't get here any faster because I didn't have what I needed in each step. I needed every single step to get me where I am. And my passion is helping other people get there faster, right? I don't want everybody to get here at 57. I want them to get here at 37 or 47 or 27, I mean, my son's 15. How awesome if he could get there at 27, I mean, that's my goal, is to give people the tools that they can use to make the changes now so that they won't get to 50 and go, how the heck did this happen? Does that make sense?
It does. So I'm listening to you, Andrea, and you're throwing some serious heavy stuff here. I mean, really, for our audiences, especially anyone that is in the corporate world, or even if you're not, but if you are working for some company, you probably want to hear this. If you are leading or in a position of management, you want to hear this. I think what you stated is, and I think for everyone that is just new in the world of business, live, I think they should be listening to this because what you stated is pretty powerful. One is I love, by the way, two things you said, very smooth. The managing is only like, keeping the process status quo,
The
which,
trains
you know,
have to run on time.
well, it's funny because it just you manage, right, the
Yeah.
process, right? So
Yeah.
manage process, manage this, and you're right. So that is just a protocol or processy, format that you have to have in place, and but people get comfortable. I think the comfort zone is really
Hmm.
very very dangerous, and I think a lot of companies in general they tend to get a decent speed and they just want to keep there because it's working. It's not broken. Let's not fix it. And that's all there is. By the way, I do relate to you. I am just like you. I'm a mover, a shaker, a crazy. When I go, I mean, I get hurricane edge. Believe it or not, it came in from a company. It came from a company. I moved from New York to Pennsylvania, and the people they used to like call me here comes hurricane because I came as a hurricane because I was like literally like all over the place. And so I'm
Mm.
coming in, it's just crazy, right? And really that's what it is. So it's you go in. I'm not, I don't like this just see. I mean, you come in, you improve. We can never stop improving. We can never stop, looking at what else can we do better. And a true trait of leadership is like what else? As a matter of fact, one of my mentors, that's exactly what we used to say. Like we sit,
Hmm.
in these meetings, like what else can we do? And
Hmm.
then we just keep brainstorming like what's the next move, what else,
Right.
and that's how you grow,
Right.
especially in the business development and sales. I mean, everybody has
Mm.
the same base, so
Hmm.
and I can go back to when I was literally a rep, when I first started in the industry. A true story, I was hired, we were 10 reps in one clinic. Now, this was in the early 90s. Now, in the managed care, it was just launching literally as a demo project in New York. And so we had this plan that was one of the five plans in New York City that were testing this demonstration project of managed care, which is now big, right?
Yeah.
So that was just the onset. And so I was one of 10. Now I was the latest comer to that team. And these people were already established in this particular facility where they have cousins working, they have family members, they already have all the relationships that they need. So they had referrals coming in. And here you come in as the new rookie in the block, and you got to figure out how to really, and they already have all the stuff. So I started analyzing like wherever they're not going, when they're showing up, what else they're missing, what areas in that facility that they
Mm.
haven't touched. And believe it or not, half of the stuff they were not even touching. So I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
good. And then I started just coming 1 hour before and 1 hour after, and then
Mm.
working around the perimeter because they had other services outside of the perimeter of the facility. And I was banging numbers every day, and and every day they post the numbers. Like, well, how do you do it? It's like I'm not going to tell you. A year later, I became their manager, so I did tell them how it was. I'm like, well, I was before you. I finished after you. So you were, working 9 to 5. I was working, eight
Hmm.
to six or whatever at the time. And so I added a couple hours of my own time, but it made me, do better and
Mm.
really easily. And then I discovered all the places where they did not go, and I got my referrals now through these things. And so that's what you have to be creative, you have to be innovative, and you have to be different. Like
Hmm.
if you want to make a difference. Now, not everybody wants that. Sometimes it's challenging to leaderships, or at least the pure people in the power. And I'm not gonna, those are two different things because there's a lot of people in power that I
Not
don't
leaders.
exactly. So
Yeah.
and that's a fact. So it is challenging. Like when you see things like why did they don't want to make a difference, or they don't want to change things, or why is it they're doing it this way? I mean, we can be. I mean, most of the companies that have made it bigger and bigger and bigger, they've changed the status quo.
Hmm.
They've changed the process. They look different. Where you're looking left. I mean, this is how it's been done for the last 100 years. Why do we
Hmm.
have to do it that way?
Hmm.
Even 9 to 5, that was 100 years ago for farming or whatever it was, a factory working, right? That changed. Now we can do things. We have technology, we have all the stuff. And you know what? COVID did actually prove that. I mean, businesses
Hmm.
didn't stop. People still try, right? I mean, the businesses still made it work, and it's not a problem, right? I mean, it worked. So
Hmm.
there's all these dynamics, but it's always been there. So you talked about also when you hire someone, this is not a landing pad, this is a launch pad. And I love that.
Yeah.
Because if someone is coming in just to sit, and coast, that is not going to do anything. You want people that want to grow bigger? Like I asked the question, like, where would you like to be in 5 years?
Hmm.
And the best answer is, I want to be in your seat. I'm like, I love, your
Hmm.
answer, because you know what? I want you to be in my seat, because if you're in my seat, that means I'm bumped up, which is a good
Hmm.
thing. We
Right.
all grow. You grow, I grow, we all grow. As a team, we do that. But if someone says, I just want to come in and do my work and that's it. I mean, sometimes you do need that, but doesn't give me an encouragement of like what this person's
Hmm.
aspirations are. So ambition, aspirations are big, and you don't see a lot of that sometimes. So these are some of the things that you just plugged in there that are very powerful. And I love what you said, that what you discovered about yourself is the ability to do more. And you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have done it in that environment. But also, it is true, we don't have all the tools whenever, like sometimes you need a certain time to get all the
Hmm.
tools. And I give this example, even what I do today for the media. I am doing what I'm doing today. I couldn't have done this 10 years ago, because I
Hmm.
didn't have the knowledge and skills and the tools and a lot of things that actually got, to a certain point. Now, when I started this, I learned some of the additional things that I needed, but then everything else that I had, it was perfect, for this platform and how I do it now. But I realized, like, could I have done it maybe 10 years ago? Probably not, because I wouldn't have, and I didn't know the technology and how to process certain things and so on and so forth. So I had to learn these new skills to be able to do this. So sometimes timing is everything, and it happens. It's the right time, the right place. It's never the wrong time, the wrong place, and that's how I
Hmm.
look at it. So again, thank you for sharing those. And you said it, but if someone can do it sooner than later, why not?
Hmm. Right.
People have to realize who they are, and pick up what they need to do and to make it work. Now, you alluded to this concept of, you work in the administrative world, and it's like you're shaking things. And you know what? Sometimes you're a troublemaker, though. Some people can
Hmm.
perceive it, because you're actually causing people to do more work. People don't like that. You create enemies quick in the corporate work. When you start, like, like, oh, here comes a troublemaker, right? Well, here comes Hurricane. Yeah,
Oh, here she comes. She's gonna
here
want
she
to
goes.
digitize everything.
Exactly.
You know.
But it's funny, because it's only a matter of time that all these things that people talked a long time ago, people have no choice to accept. I mean, I'm going to give you a true example. Telehealth.
Yeah,
It's existed for
a long
years,
time.
but people did not adopt it until they had no choice.
Hmm.
Like, well, hello. I mean, what's the difference? If you could have, if you doing today, you could have done it then. I mean, technology didn't. Skype was for years, right?
Hmm.
Zoom actually has been a long time before COVID. People discovered, and oh my God, Zoom. It was there before. So I mean, all these things were in existence, but people did not take advantage of them, and a lot of other things, right? You're talking about digitizing. I mean, medical records have been,
Oh yeah.
digitizing for years now, right? So but there was a lot of reluctance. I mean, of course, there's cost, there's stuff, but frankly, it costs more to have a nice little storage room when you can just put it on a file,
Yeah.
scan, and so all these things are important. But it's the idea, the concept.
Hmm.
But then now it takes vision. So now let's
Yes.
go and talk about the vision and the leadership, because
Hmm.
managers versus leaders, two
Hmm.
different things. And
Very.
everybody manages, process and stuff, but like leading is one thing as opposed to managing. So let's talk about that concept, how you see it, and what are some of the things or the fails of some of the people at the helm.
Well, John Maxwell says leadership is influence, plain and simple. And it's just, if you want to make a difference, then you have to actually be willing to influence people. And you don't have to influence them in a schmarmy way. You can do it in a way that is encouraging. You can find their strengths and play to those. I have watched, and I deal with this on a regular basis. I'm actually got a contract out to a company right now who said, I have an executive vice president who we promoted, but we didn't train them. Right. And so it's like they're sitting in this leadership position and they don't have any training. And this is what I watch, especially in a large university system where, they don't really have, you got people who may or may not be ambitious, but they're good technically at what they do. So we promote them into a leadership position because there's really no place else to go. And they don't have leadership skills. They don't understand what it means to let somebody else take the credit. They don't understand what it means to get consensus. They don't have any clue of what it means to actually influence in a way that is productive. They don't understand how to look for other people's strengths because they're just so used to looking for their own and this is not, I don't mean this in a bad way, but their own interest. They're looking for, how can I do better? Even sometimes it's like that. They might be very interested in doing better themselves, but they have no idea how to do that with other people. So they're not trained in communication. They're not trained in emotional intelligence. They're not trained in any of those things. And I've watched too many people fail, and the people who suffer are the ones who are underneath them. Okay. Usually the person who's been promoted doesn't get fired, especially in a big corporation, because they've got wonderful human resources parameters that are in place that make it like you have to have one strike and then two strike and then this thing and that thing. But if your team's not performing, now in sales, that might be different. I've never been in sales. But if your team's not performing, it's not the manager's fault. It's like in most corporate settings, it's not the manager's fault. It's the team's fault. It's the individual contributor's fault. And I took over a brand. My first time I took over to manage anybody, I walked in thinking I was going to manage eight, or yeah, eight. See, I held up seven fingers, right? Um, and I sat down with my HR business partner and my boss, and she said, "Everybody that I manage, just give to Andrea now." And I said, "Hold up, that was like two divisions instead of just one." So I ended up with 32.
We
And I'm like, and half of them
try
were
with
in another
fire.
building. And I'm like, I don't even, I mean, I had read like the 5 Minute Manager, those kind of like classic management books, but I'm like, okay, so I know not to hold, I know to give them feedback immediately, but other than that, I'm kind of lost. And one of the things I did believe in, though, was if you've got to meet people where they are. And there were literally the first thing she said was, okay, this person you need to manage out, and that person you need to manage out, and this person you need to manage out. And I'm like, why? Until the guy that had my job before me walked by one day and said, "Hey, welcome. My name's so and so, and I'm just counting the days to retirement." And I'm like, well, now I get it. Right now I know why that person and that person and that person, quote unquote, need to be managed out. So what I did was I started to get to know them. And one person was on permanent leave, and she was literally just playing the game until she could be released and get paid while she was out. And we do have those. But one of them was somebody that just needed a little sunshine, just needed a little sunshine, and that flower just blossomed. By the time I left, she was running programs and doing amazing stuff. 2 years later, guess what? She was back where she started because she didn't have a manager that cared. That's huge to me. So when I say I'm a disc behavioral analysis consultant, and I look at people and say, if you don't speak Spanish and that person over there speaks Spanish, you need to learn how to speak Spanish. It's the same thing as saying, if that person is a steady and needs security and needs a really positive atmosphere, and you're a D over here, you're a driver, and you just say results, 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 that person's not going to thrive under you. You've got to learn how to communicate with them. All of those things that I watched for so many years came into play and come into play when I work with my clients on a regular basis. And it is so lovely. And so I get cold chills thinking about watching the light bulbs go on, watching people say, I feel seen and heard for the first time, because nobody really wants to fail, Hurricane. Nobody really wants to do a poor job. Nobody wants to be managed out. And quite frankly, I don't know many managers who truly, really want their people to do bad. They just don't know how to do it well. So, the privilege of going in and teaching people basic leadership skills, communication skills, and then marrying it all into their core values and being able to see how that makes a difference and how that affects everything that you do, that's super rewarding work.
Well, thank you. And you touched on a few things. One of them being the real biggest mistake that's being done. I mean, it's not just in healthcare, I think in
Mm-mm.
every aspect, which is we sometimes reward people
Yes.
for doing their job by giving a promotion that they may
Mhm.
not be qualified for. And I get it. You want to, I mean, every company would love, and it's always ideal to see. I mean, when you ask, hey, is there a room for growth in this company? You want to know that there is that, but it has to be in the right fit. And so sometimes, like talking about sales, right? Someone is a great salesperson,
Mm.
but they just cannot manage. They're not good at, handling people and process and stuff and pressures and stuff. They're good at what they do, but they just don't have that. Now, can they learn those skills? Probably. But someone who has the passion and the ability to, they may be lesser of a salesperson, for example. I'm just
Hmm.
giving an example, but they'll have additional characteristics that can really be a good
Yep.
fit for a lead in role. And sometimes that's what it is. Like we do it for the wrong reasons, and then you get caught in the process because now you have someone in a power
Hmm.
position. And again, now it's me or you, right? So it's
Yeah.
I'm at the helm and I got more authority. And you know what? If you're making it look bad, you're going to be next, right? And that's the other thing. Like, I love what you said. When you're given a team, some people will tell like this and that, the other. Usually, especially if you come to a new company and you get the orientation of like who, here's what, where, and then they start giving you all the different, bad and good things about different people. I have a rule. I don't even take that stuff. That's out.
Hmm.
I would judge myself on who they are, and if I determine that they're really, as you said, they have what it takes, or what they're missing. And that's the other thing. You can't blame people until you give them all the tools. Now, if you give them all the tools
Yes.
and the time,
Thank you.
and they don't make it, that's on them, right? But
Exactly.
but you can't, like you give some people, you the role or whatever, and you're just like, hey, well, you're failing. That's also in management, right? You give someone the role, but you don't give them anything, and
Hmm.
sometimes there's limitations to what they can do because the power that be or the higher ups, they're just not allowing you to get certain things and to get
Yes.
done. And no matter what you do, you're hand tied, and there's nothing you can do about that. So then now it becomes a reflection. I've also experienced that in different
Mm.
places where you can only do so much with what you have, and some of us can do more with a little, but there's still limitations to what you can do.
Yeah.
And when you get to that point, if you can relay the message, well, we need to make certain changes to be able to do this, and this is what the changes that I recommend based on all the stuff, and here's the data to sustain and support this discussion. But like, it goes to deaf ears, and like, we can't
Mhm.
do this because they're looking at more profits and how to, this is not on their agenda. I mean, sometimes that's what it is. Now, people sometimes tend to look at profits, immediate profits versus long-term profits, and that's the other thing. Like, quick fixes don't do it. You got to look at long-term, strategy, and then make it work. So all these things are real, and it is sad to see it. I've seen it in real, live, where, and I'm talking about people with higher authority, and
Mhm.
positions, and you still like wonder, like, why? I mean, like, it's not rocket science. It's very simple. I can show you the numbers. Had we done this, that, the other, things will
Mhm.
move. But you don't want to do this because you're given the excuse of that, and yet you won't expect that. I mean, it's like being insane, right? It's like trying to do the same thing over and over
Over and over.
and
Yeah.
expecting different things. It's not going to work. I mean, and I can, like, I'm going to give you a true example. And one last company I was at, you know, 12 years in the making, and they have literally not made, a big impact. And so I
Mm.
joined them for a couple of years, and I was working with them to make a difference. And that was my role. And we were able to start pushing the numbers up and the growth. But you get to a point where you're still turning, you bring in
Mm.
people, but then you're losing people. And then when you look at why you're losing people, they ask you, like, well, why? Well, it's the same reasons you've always had. The problem that you've been losing the people over the last 12 years,
Yeah.
nothing different. You haven't changed, because we tell you what needs to be done in our world. You need one, like, there's three, four components that you have to have. If you don't, doesn't matter. Your members are going to come in, they're not happy, they're going to move,
Mm.
and that's all.
Yeah.
And this goes for hospital systems, for business, in fact, whatever it
Yeah.
is, it's going to happen. But again, now the thing is that some leaders, as you said, they need to be influencers, but some leaders are absentee leaders. They're not there. I mean, really,
Uh-huh.
you maybe they get one of those what do you call them, whole uh I forgot what they call, but when they do those calls, like once a month, once a year, a quarter, when they
Oh,
talk
sure,
to every,
sure, sure.
you
Like
know
team
uh,
calls or remote,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they just show up, and they do their little, spiel, which, by the way, it's cool. I get it. But I tell you, like, I've been in other places where the president and all the top, the C-suite, they're actually entrenched with everybody. They show
Hmm.
up, they talk to people. They listen. My first experience, literally true story, when my first day at the job in this 30 years career path, the CEO was literally at an event, walking the event, working in the
Mm.
community.
Hmm.
That was my first impression. So I literally, I had started that Monday. They had an event Tuesday, and I was called to go to that event. And we are in the middle of Brooklyn, and you have, this is the president of the plan, actually giving to the community and talking to
Mm.
people, and doing the whole thing on with her own hands. I mean, I was like, very powerful stuff. Just see someone, and this was a great person. I mean, with a lot of
Mm.
great leadership, background. But yet you see that now we see that that particular person. I mean, it only motivates you to do more and to want to do more. And that's the thing. Like as a leader of any level, by the way, it doesn't have to be a
Hmm.
CEO. Your leader as department, a manager.
Hmm.
If you're absent and you're not part of the whole thing, and it's all about you, not about the team. That's the other thing. There's no I in team, right? So it's
Hmm.
a matter of we need to be together. And by the way, no manager succeeds on their own without the team. Without the team, they would never exist. They would never do anything because they can't do the job on themselves. You
Yeah.
need everybody in there. So, but sometimes you get this power trip.
Mhm.
Very common. Now, I'm
Oh, I
sure
did it.
you.
I
Well,
did.
we all
I
experience
did it.
that. You know,
Yeah.
when you start, you get the power trip. It's normal, but it's how quickly you realize that is not the applicable way, and you can transfer literally, and you'll find that you get better results when
Yeah.
you're not on the power trip, when you actually are more a friend. And it's not about being close to your team. You can be close. Like I can be. Listen, I can be. I had worked with my best friend
Mm.
both as colleagues, and I report to him, and his brother reports to me. And you know what? Like it's usually like a conflict. Like you can't be like, but guess what? If it came to the job, you know, and a decision to, let's say, terminate for performance, I had no problem doing it. And he would have had no problem because it's not about that. Outside of the job, we're buddies, but at work,
Mm.
we still got to do what we have to do. It's like in the military. You're overranking me. I'm gonna have to follow, right? You know, the
Yeah.
orders. So that's all there is. So there's a lot of the stuff that has to play. Now in your expertise, you know, you meet with a lot of people and you make a difference.
Hmm.
I mean, I love what you said. You were called back to train the same people that you work with and get paid more to show them certain things that you could have done there for a lot
Hmm.
less. But you know, how is that? It's amazing, right? Uh, and by the way, another thing that just happened recently. I mean, I was talking to this particular consultant, and they said, well, this plan, you know, they're looking for someone to help them. It turned out that it's the same plan that actually was there before, and I told them it's not going to work, but obviously it's not working because they're still looking for someone to make a difference. You
Mm.
know, and I'm not saying that I'm the best thing. I mean, I'm good at what I do, but that's besides the point. The fact is, if you're still looking and you see no result, that means you're still doing something that is not right, right? And
Hmm.
so that should give you an indication that maybe it's changing your habit, changing your way of thinking, and
Sure.
that's all it is. I mean, we do this at home, we do this with our family, we do this with our lives,
Oh, I
right?
have a 15-year-old. We do this every day.
There you go. It's fact. Well, so you mentioned disc.
Yes.
Yeah, just for audiences. I mean, I know what it is, but you know, can you just expand on that for some people that may not understand what that is?
Sure. I use the words or I use the term behavioral analysis tool because it is based on how you react to things and it's how you communicate and how you like to have people communicate with you. When you take it as a really quick little 10 to 15-minute assessment online, it'll spit out your results and it'll put them. The Maxwell report is actually because People Keys does it and they will put it out for a bunch of different organizations. But the Maxwell report is a 32-page report and it starts out with a chart that's a XY axis with quadrants. It's based on the science from all the way back, like the humors from Hippocrates, you know, all the way back to the sanguine and the choleric and the phlegmatic and the sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic, and I forget the other one. Anyway, but it's this XY axis. The Y axis is this continuum of being outgoing or reserved, and the X axis is from being people oriented to being process or task oriented. And so whenever you take your assessment, you will plot out somewhere on that quadrant, and we're all or on that graph, but we're all a little bit of all four of them, but we fall in a dominant one. And so those four quadrants from top left around clockwise are what make up the DISC, D, I, S, and C. So D stands for dominant or driver. It's about 3% of the population. These people are your get it done people. I'm glad there's only 3% of the population that is drivers because otherwise we would have way too many bus drivers on the bus, right? And
Chiefs.
too many chiefs. But you need people like this. If you don't have somebody like this on your sales team, right? If you don't have somebody like this on a project management team, you got to have somebody like this. And many times they're in a leadership position. If not, they're in a position with a lot of autonomy so they can move quickly.
Mhm.
Surgeons are like this, I mean, ER professionals, a lot of D's. So moving around clockwise are the I's. This is about 11% of the population. These are your influencers and your inspirationals. They're happy, they're outgoing. Because remember, I said it was and the D's fall into that quadrant that is at the top of the y-axis. So they're outgoing, they're people, I mean, they're extroverted, but they're also process and task oriented. So they're extroverted, but task. So that's where they're very results. The I's, the influencers are extroverted, but they're people oriented. So I'm an I. It never surprises people. We like to tell stories. We're the ones who, walk in and we're like, the party can start. I'm here, that's who the I's are. And you need those because they keep you happy, right? They keep things. I am the one who's going to drop the little silly bomb in the middle of a really serious conversation because we need some levity, right? It's just a natural thing. It just flows. Moving around, the people and reserved oriented people are your steadies. It's about 69% of the population. This is why we have teams, right? They are team oriented. These are our team players. I do a presentation for DISC that uses the Washington crossing the Delaware painting as an example. And Washington is your D, the guy holding the flag is your I. And the people who are rowing the boat, all the people rowing the boat, those are all your S's. And if you didn't have your S's, the trains really wouldn't run on time and none of your companies would get anything done. Now, they are the least open to change. They are the most like on your change curve, they are at the bottom, right? And it's going to take a lot to get them to change. But once they do, they're steady on, right? It's
Steady
like
Eddie.
they're going to do it. And we say that in a way sometimes that makes it sound boring, but it's not at all. These people are passionate. They're your rule followers and they're going to make sure you follow the rules too. Okay. That's your S's. The final quadrant is the reserved and process or task oriented people. These are your C's, your compliance or your creatives. These are your accountants, your musicians, your artists. These are people who are just like focused on all the details. They will ask you 10,000 questions for every process, not because they don't think you're doing it well, but they want to make sure that whatever they deliver is going to be accurate. So a D trying to communicate with a C is going to be very frustrated. Just deliver this product. And the C is like, well, do you want it to be blue? Do you want it to have these dimensions? What do you want? And so my husband is a high C. My son is a high C. And my second number, or my second letter is a C. So in talking about, we're taking SOLs right now in Virginia, the standard of learning stuff. And just in talking about getting him ready for his science SOL tomorrow, I told my husband, I said, you have to give all of us all the details because we're all up in the C right now. So when you understand that we all have patterns by which we communicate, it helps you be able to recognize those in other people. And when I didn't know that about one of my team members, and she was just a doer, 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 and then I said, please come to our party. We're having a birthday celebration. It's in the conference room. And she literally I'd never seen a grown woman like throw a fit. She threw a fit. She was so angry. She was screaming at me, you can't make me come. Look at your eyebrow, it's up.
Yeah.
She was like, you cannot make me come. I cannot believe you're making me do this. I'm like, whoa, hey, no big deal. Well, I learned later, this is a classic IS conflict. This is a classic deal where I'm like, let's go have a little fun, take a break from your work. And she's like, I need to do my work and you are just encroaching on that. And I didn't realize that she was bottling all that up. Once I understood that, now we get along great. And all I had to do was figure out she's an F1 enthusiast. No problem. Me too. She likes cats. Okay, I'll ask about them. I mean, it's just like when I figured those things out, then I knew how to communicate with her as a staff member. But when I do this in teams and organizations, it literally causes relationships to be reconciled. It causes processes to be smoothed. We can even put up little signs outside of someone's office that it says, I am a this, whatever. Please please give me all the details when you ask me to do a project, or please just give me the bottom line. I had a boss who's a D, and he would ask me to research something and give him a recommendation. So the first line was, "This is what I think we should do. If you want the details, they're below." And I could have said the sky is purple, and he would never have known I put that in there because it was like, great, move along, But I had documented it if he wanted it, and
It
if
was
we
there.
ever needed to, CYA, right? But I just gave him the too long, do not read, and he was fine. So when we understand these things about each other, Hurricane, it makes a difference because then we can actually look across the table and see somebody who needs all the details, or just needs the bottom line, or just needs a good story, and let them be who they are while we're communicating what we need to communicate.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. It's funny. I'm listening to you, and it's almost like giving me a flashback on all these years and all the different things. And so I did actually get an assessment myself on who I was in the disc, and I was a DI. So my first was D, and I was the second. And I think the color code was red, yellow, and I think
Yep.
there's green and blue. So those were mine. And it's amazing because when you do the exercise with a big team, then everybody really you know who they are, and they really it doesn't fail. As a
No,
matter of fact,
every time.
when you do it correctly, and I think 99% is accurate when you do with the assessments and everything. You would know, like you could have possibly told like who was going to be in what bucket. Sometimes some of them are in maybe a weird one, like I thought maybe you would have been here, but you're right, and you're right. A D for me, like you give me the highlights,
Hmm.
and then the details are later. Like if I need more, I can always reach out and get more.
Hmm.
But you're right. So that's but it's amazing how it is, and I personally think that if you're listening or watching anyone in the corporate ladder or HR, you know, or learning development, this should be a mandated process for every single department.
Yeah.
At least once in the lifetime of someone, especially if someone is going to leadership, because knowing your audience, knowing
Yep.
who you're going to be working with, is only going to help you do more and achieve better and get better results and less conflict. Because again, conflict is huge in corporate.
Yeah.
And it happens because people are clashing because they don't understand who they're talking, or they have the expectations are different. So when you set the expectations,
And they
things
don't
sound different.
understand themselves,
Oh,
right?
that
The
is true.
first person we lead is ourselves.
Yep, yep.
And if we don't know how to lead ourselves, then we may be demanding things and not explaining expectations without realizing why, right? Because maybe I don't have a vision. Maybe as a DI, you are a visionary. And knowing you're a DI tells me why you did so well in sales, right? And tells me that, and I was going to ask you if you were a D, so it really doesn't surprise me that much because of all of the information you gave me early on about, well, when they were doing the 9 to 5, I was doing the 8 to 6, and I was around the perimeter and figuring all these other things out that they didn't do. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. But that's the kind of person you needed to be in that situation. And as long as you know that about yourself, and as long as I know I'm an ICD, I have like nothing in the S. So I tell people I'm a definition of a non-team player. And so when I look back and I see, oh, well, because my brain functions the way it does, I'm a natural critical thinker. I always question the status quo. No wonder I struggled in large university settings, amazing university settings. I don't ever want to put any kind of shade on either one of those universities. They're amazing in what they do. I didn't need to be there. And when you know who you are, then you can show up as you. And you don't live your life by somebody else's leadership principles or somebody else's guidelines. And you can be more authentic and be more magnetic at the same time. That's when people will come to you and follow you.
Well, thank you. And it is. I mean, listen, it's almost a necessary to actually do this correctly because, as you said, even and I love the percentages like the 3, the 11, the 60%,
Mhm.
because in reality, that's actually how it is. I mean, you have certain leaders. I mean, we don't have a lot of leaders in the world. You got a few in all aspects of life. And a lot of people would rather follow than lead because again, there's accountability, responsibility, there's all kind of stuff, decision making. People are afraid. They don't like to make decisions. You can pick 10 people in any
Mhm.
situation and tell them, hey, let's make a decision. Everybody's gonna stay quiet and wait for that first person to make a move. It's always the case. Even it's on a dance floor. You gotta
Mhm.
like people are
Oh, yeah.
watching until the first guy or gal goes in and everybody becomes very like cool about going in.
Yeah.
I mean it's so talking about that back in the days when I was in younger age, I was that first guy on the dance floor
Me
and the last
too.
one on the dance floor. Yeah, I didn't care, But but those are things like you do you, but that's just my characteristic. But the
Yeah.
fact is, you love. I mean, you guys said. I mean, you got to love your C's and D's, because the D's keeps you in check, because you, without those people that kind of like, challenge, because here's the thing, especially at a D, we just go,
Mhm.
sometimes we don't look at the little fine prints and stuff. Those
Yeah.
guys will tell you, wait a minute, did you check on this? Oh, thank you, because
Yeah.
it could
The
be
C's are going to do
so,
it for you.
yeah, well, the C's are going to be doing the functions, and they're going to keep. And so if something stops, like, what's up? Oh, well, we need this, and you get the feedback. Now, again, you have to be open to the feedback. That's another problem. Sometimes leadership is not really open to, frank and straight, feedback. And even when you give the data, sometimes it's like they don't believe it. Like, the data doesn't lie. What I'm showing you is real. This is what my recommendations would be. Let's do. But sometimes they have they have difficulties making those calls, because again,
Mhm.
they feel that this is not aligned with whatever vision, the company may
Mhm.
have. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you're in business, it's only to grow. Simple.
Supposedly.
Well, suppose, right? You can't go in business not to grow, right? So if you're going to do that, then you have to look at every aspect. Growing healthy, obviously, growing the right way, but you have to grow, and you got to look at every aspect of the business to make you, do that. Now, you mentioned core values.
Mhm.
So you hear this all in corporations, our core
Mhm.
values. But let's talk about the importance of those core values for in a leadership, in a company setting. But also, I think even in our personal lives, we're supposed to have core values that we apply. It's in society, but in a corporation, it's just as big, as important, and also it's important for people to really buy and adhere to those core values.
Yeah, and I do want to make a distinction between business and organizational core values and personal core values.
Sure.
I work in personal core values. Business and organizational core values are very tightly woven in with their mission and vision,
Mhm.
and they may have everything to do with the purpose and the function and the impact that that organization either has in the community or wants to make in the community. Personal core values can be honored in those situations. I don't like to use the word aligned, because that means if I'm aligning, then I'm taking on yours, right? It's like, no. And in a minute, I'll tell you what my top core value is, and it won't surprise you. Um, but
Um,
yeah, so basically, personal core values are principles and priorities. These guide our individual actions. These represent the foundational convictions that allow me or you to navigate, we used that word earlier, complex, difficult situations, the highs and the lows, the ups, the really high winds or the big waves that come over us, all while keeping our own true identity and authority at the forefront. So these are the things that we're wired with. These are our non-negotiables. And that sounds very ethereal. It doesn't sound very concrete. But what if I said to you, every decision that you've ever made, every time you've been offended, every time you've cried from joy, every single relationship, every single job, and every single sale you've ever made has somehow, in some way, either touched on or been affected by a core value?
I would say yes.
Yeah,
I'd agree.
it's that important. And here's the other piece. We don't always know what our core values are because we have been conditioned to believe that everything is outside of us. We've been taught that, um, sorry, go on a tangent, but when I do workshops in core values. And I start off by telling people, we're going to work on our core values. You're going to work on, defining what yours are. I call it uncovering because it's usually by the time we're adults, they're buried. When we're kids, we know exactly what they are. But by the time we're adults, they're buried, especially the older we get, the further down they are. But I tell them, if you're going to start with faith, family, and country, I'm going to push back
Okay. Well,
because
standardized.
most of those are outside of you. Depending on how you define faith, it could be inside of you, but most of them are outside of you. And by faith, most people mean some kind of religious belief. Because here's the deal: beliefs are changeable, beliefs are always changeable. And we don't think about that, but they are. Ask anybody who's changed a political party or a religion, they're all changeable. Core values are not changeable. They are the things about you that will never change. They are invisible, but like we can't see them, but you always know when one has been offended. If you have a core value of respect, we're going to know if it's been offended or if it's been dishonored, right? My top core value, I thought, like this one right here, it says freedom. So for the longest time, as a 27-year-old, it was like, I don't have a job, right? That was freedom to me. Spoken like a true 27-year-old, 30 years later, I have realized that it is much deeper than that. For me, it's autonomy of thought. So do not tell me how to think, right? My husband has learned over the years, instead of saying, hey, wouldn't you agree that this, to say, what do you think about this? And then we still have this amazing conversation while he honors the fact that I want to be able to think for myself. And growing up, and one of the reasons why I think I developed bulimia and depression, one of the things that was consistently dishonored in my life was this ability to think for myself. I was told that I was supposed to be this way. I was supposed, like, I come from the South, evangelical Christian South, right? And so women have a specific role to play. There's certain things that we're supposed to do and not do. And then, of course, I'm raised in one of the largest Protestant denomination in the world. So therefore, we have all of our theology buttoned up. Well, I am a free thinker. I want to know what if. I want to know how can we make it better, right? I want to know all of that stuff. And so I was in constant conflict with myself. Now, because I have all those coping mechanisms that I shared, I still deal with some of that with my bulimia. But now I look back on it and I say, oh, well, no wonder, no wonder. My second core value is authenticity. I need to be myself. I was told from a very early age, you're talking too much. Not everybody wants to hear your opinion. And, now, hey, we get paid to share our opinion, don't we? People come to me for advice because I have the ability to do that. I have wisdom from years, but that's my personality. And I've realized I just need to be authentically me. And if that means making a silly face, that means making a silly face. Or if talking, I got in trouble in one of my jobs for I was impersonating someone, but I was told it was mocking. But I just am silly sometimes. Like I said, I just drop the silly bombs. And then my third one is belonging. And I realized that community that I grew up in Korea gave me this sense of belonging that I couldn't find here in the States. And so I've had to learn and figure out ways to understand how I belong in my family, how I belong in my friend circle, how I belong in my church, how I belong in my community, in my chamber. I mean, little things like that really make a difference. Because here's the thing, the other piece about core values is that they're reciprocal. They never are just for you, right? If I say my top core value is respect, but I only want you to respect me and I don't have to respect you, that's just narcissism, right? If I truly hold respect that highly, it's both. I will fight for your respect as that somebody respects you as much as I will fight for my own. So
We'll
when
stand
we
for that.
Yeah. And because that's a non-negotiable. So unless something's truly a non-negotiable for you, it's not really core value. And the goal is to figure out those people that asked me to come back and teach my old colleagues. They said, can you tell them how to align their core values with our core values? I said, good luck
Ooh.
with that. That's the wrong question. What you want to know is how can I find a space where my core values can be honored and I can do my job with authenticity and in an ethical way without dishonoring my core values. That's why I quit. I realized I couldn't do the work they needed me to do and honor my core values. And so I had to do something else. So when I work with people and they uncover some of these things about themselves, they look back and they say, oh, I can look back and say, well, that's why my mother said I was a strong-willed child, because I wanted to think for myself. And so when I help people do that, it is amazing how it changes everything about what they do. They no longer have to defend their positions. Their boundaries become very clear and very peaceful, right? It's like, these are my internal boundaries. You can do whatever you want, but I'm not going to argue with you about whether or not I'm going to think like you. It's just, I don't have any need to do that anymore. Whereas I used to argue with people because I didn't understand that that was something that was being dishonored. Now I know. And so when you have that piece of the pie, and then you have the disc where you know how you communicate things, the last bit for me is helping people understand how to live that out in a way that is gracious and with I don't know, with beauty and ease. And that's what my title or my business name is, the Intentional Optimist. So I have a personal lifestyle that I call intentional optimism. It's 6 tenets of living out attitudes and mindsets that kind of take all of that stuff that we learn about ourselves and then learn how to live that in a way that honors us and honors others. And so being able to understand our core values, just it makes it all make sense.
Thank you. Andrea, I'm listening to you, and a lot of people probably could relate to the core values as what we refer to as our principles,
Yes,
and
sir.
and really without
That's what I do
compromise,
is I
because
just differentiate between the two. There's a principles and there's core values. Yeah.
but some people would just generally, speaking like, oh, I have my principles, and you can't touch my principles, and these are. But I think in deep, if they go deeper, that's really what it is. Your core
Yeah.
values kind of build up to those, and then you're right. If you're being asked to compromise your own beliefs and your own views and your own values, then you basically eventually not gonna feel it, and you're gonna be like, no, this is not it. And we see that sometimes at work when you're being asked to do things that you know that are wrong. That's not how you want to do things. Even a true story about staffing, for example, back in the days, talking about like how you like we had that power trip. I realized so early on that that is not me. I mean, I'm not the type of person that can be condescending and talk down to people or like be like overwhelming. That's not it. But I realized I had so much pressure on myself, and that was the style I was being given through
Hmm.
my
Yep.
hierarchies, and then basically that kind of rolled down. Then one day I actually challenged it, and it's the true fact. One time I got everybody and the team. I'm like, well, you know what? You guys kind of blame me. Let's talk about where it's coming from. And we went to our, you know, at the time our leader and like, hey, listen, people, the team is not happy because we always, condescended to them, and guess what? They let me, nice cold, and turkey, and they said no, we're cool. So I became the bad guy. And they went on a witch hunt for me, and I won that battle too. But that's another story. But really, but this is really it. So sometimes if it's not you, it's not you, and you
Yeah.
would know, folks. It's just a matter. Just don't challenge it or like compromise and buy into it. That's why sometimes you leave. If it's not
Hmm.
righteous, you move on next life, and you will prevail when you're actually in your element. Because
Yes.
really, if you're not in your element, you're just suffocating, and then that will cause you to make mistakes and be
Right.
bad and not behave in the right way. As you said, you want to be respectful to yourself and to other people and expect the
Hmm.
same. You want to have authenticity. It's you, and it's funny because I don't know if it's the fact of life, but as you mature,
Yes.
things that I refer to as wisdom, you become very clear about who you are, what you want, and you're very vocal about stating it. I have to say, I have no shame in the game telling people what's up now. And maybe I'm diplomatic to a degree. You have to be nice, and but you can tell people when it's not, and we can disagree. I mean, agree to disagree, and the story. I don't have to, like you said. I mean, it's just a
Yeah.
matter like
I
you
don't
got
have
to
to
know.
defend myself anymore.
Exactly. Like, well, see, like, but we find ourselves like, and that's the other thing. Like, a lot of younger folks today, in the business world specifically, they will compromise. They'll stuff because they're afraid to lose a job because they don't want to
Yeah.
speak up. Now, I do have to say, I am impressed to a degree that the Generation Z, I mean, I'm not, I think more than the millennials, they can tell you off right away. They don't care. They speak their mind more clearly, I think, that than
Hmm.
we've been trained. At least, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. That was
Yep.
like, and so that was kind of like a
Me too.
way of thinking different. But I think today's generation, they'll tell you, like, if no, they'll challenge you. Now, it gets a little upsetting sometimes because it's kind of clashy. But when you think about it in the deep, they just speak in their mind, and they're being who they are, but they figured it out earlier than we did, I guess. But it is
That
amazing
goes back
how
to what I said from the beginning. It's like
yeah.
some people will figure out their core values as things fall away, right? It's like when you go through hard things, hurricane, like losing my mom to cancer, when you go through those things, all the superfluous junk falls off, right? It's like you learn these things fall off. Now, some people are going to hang on to that and just never learn, but a lot of people will kind of emerge, sort of like a phoenix or something, and we do get more clear on those things. But what if we could hand this off to that Gen Z generation and make a difference now? And kind of like my mother always said, let's stop the cycle. Let's actually do it different from the beginning. So I'm training my son in this stuff. I want him to understand and have that. Like I said, he's 15, and I want him to have that kind of that knowledge and some of that wisdom from the beginning. I want him to understand these things about himself. So we've got his disc report sitting up there. It's Maxwell's got a college and career one that's amazing. It's 42 pages for the kids because it tells them some core value stuff. It actually tells them the way they learn, and it tells them based on their personality style. I think it's 2 pages worth of three single spaced columns of ideas for jobs. like different types of careers based on your personality and your skills. So we're training him now because I would rather see him succeed early.
Well, listen, spoken as a mother,
Yeah.
there's nothing more that we want is for our children to be more successful, if not better, in their career paths and everything. I mean, that's just any parents, wish for their kids. I hope that's the case for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's the
We're making
majority.
some assumptions, but they're okay to make.
But yeah, I mean, listen, there's always an exception to the rule, but I think that will be hopefully the least, percentage. But the fact is, you're right. These are important pieces of life, and they apply in real life as well as because corporate life or work life is always going to
Mhm.
be part of it. You're not going to live this world, without having some sort of a job somewhere. Even if you owned your own company, even if you
Mhm.
you were leading, you still need all these tools to be able to apply, and otherwise you lose your business because you're not going to have anyone to listen to you or work with you or help you support your ventures. So it's kind of that thing. So these are things that are real, and they just you can't get out of. Now
Mhm.
you mentioned your business intentional optimism or optimist. So how did you come up with that one? I mean, is that just like because that's really you, and you figured out that's the way to do it, or
You weren't kidding. This is going to be a long conversation.
oh, I
And
told
for
you.
a DI, you're sitting here listening to my stories quite well.
I
No,
learned.
good for you. It's a good example. No, I mentioned that I lost my mother at 50, and I watched her, brilliant woman who took 14 different universities to finally graduate because she kept putting my dad through school and she kept doing like going to school a little bit
Wow.
here, a little bit there. They married at 19, they were high school sweethearts. And so she would just always do that. But she finally graduated cum laude for the University of Maryland in Korea for the armed forces, and because our missionaries could take online, courses there. And she was a project manager for 16 townhomes, and she was a volunteer for the Red Cross. She was a GS-13, unpaid, so she was basically colonel level. She would take dignitaries to the DMZ. I told you she traveled to Geneva. She won the Clara Barton Award. Amazingly strong and powerful woman. They came back to the United States. She got a job as an administrative assistant. And I watched her and I'm like, what are you doing? And, some of it's culture, some of it's just the way we're raised, some of it's, she just, I don't know that she had I don't know what it was, but she still had that missionary drive and she still wanted to work in mission. So she ended up working for our International Mission Board. But she was very frustrated for a long time. And I watched her being frustrated, but I also watched her as she learned that she had cancer, as she dealt with cancer. She had lupus before that, so she suffered a lot as well. But by the time we were losing her, I had an 8-year-old adopted son, and she would get the Sunday before she died on Thursday, she was on the floor playing with him. She spent the last 4 months of her life, 6 months, getting knee to knee with me. And we live about an hour away. And I would drive over on Thursday night and relieve my dad, for hospice care and stuff. And she would get knee to knee and say, is there anything I haven't told you? Is there anything I haven't shared? And she wanted to make sure that she had said everything she needed to say and she wanted to go out well. So I watched my mother die well. And I wanted to emulate a lot of that without having to do the dying part anytime soon. And she was a true sanguine, like bubbly. She was Norm. She'd walk in the bar and everybody go, Judy, I mean, it was just, she was that person. And I'm not 100% that person. I'm a little bit more realistic and I tend to be, like, my throat closes a little bit talking about being quite that outgoing. But part of me really wanted to be that way. And I realized that there were things that I knew I could do differently so that I wouldn't, I mean, we're all going to have to, like, I don't know, at the end, give a reckoning, right? And would that we all had time to say, is there anything I can fix before I leave, right? But what if we don't? And so I said at 50, I'm like, you know what? I need to know. I need to know that I'm living in a way on a daily basis so that if I don't get the chance to say, is there anything I haven't told you? I don't have to worry about that. Now, we're not perfect, but I kind of did a brain dump and decided all those principles I said I wanted to live. I said, this is how I wanted to do it. And I came up with too many. And then they've kind of, I'm just a processor. And so I put it all down and I pulled them into about 6 major categories. And I said, all right, these are some things that I can actually stand by. These are things I can live by. So I came up with 6 tenets. Even though that's kind of a religious term, it's really like the principles that we live by. And they really are mindsets and attitudes that I try to employ, and I teach my clients to employ them in order to live out your goals and your dreams with excellence. And it makes a difference. It's things like being optimistic, having some hope, being present, understanding wonder. It's not just about being where you are, it's about being open and kind, being energetic, joyful, understanding that life is more important and people are more important than things or ideas. Having courage, being willing to lead, being that first person on the dance floor, somebody's got to do it. And
The tough
anywhere
job.
else. Yeah. That resiliency that I talked about earlier that we develop. Being wise, that's the one that's probably the hardest one for me to really own, because I always see wisdom as something for like curly haired, purple haired old ladies, right? And, people would show up in my office and shut the door, physicians to talk with me because I had life experience, or they found my advice helpful, or they just needed a sounding board. And so I realized that being able to respect people in that way and seek to understand, as Steve Covey says, before being understood, that's all part of wisdom. And then the last one is being intentional about it. People said, "Here comes the hurricane." Well, people knew when I was coming down the hall too, because it was, I mean, they could hear my heels coming, and I don't ever wander. It's like if I don't have a destination, then I'm just floating. I grew up sailing on a little sunfish sailboat, and if you let go of the rudder on a boat, the water takes over and it just goes in a circle. Well, I can't be that person. And so for me, intentional is the most natural, but these are the things I teach people. And I even had one client who, I have it on like a piece of paper, and she had it in a 3-ring binder. And when we met, she had gone to a team meeting. We met, and she said, "I came back to my desk and I flipped it open. I'm like, that's right. I want to do this. I wasn't doing this piece of intentional optimism." I'm like, okay, well, I guess it works. I guess it's transferable to other people. And that's when I started using it with my clients.
Oh, thank you. And I think it's powerful tools. I mean, it is really the real concept that I think everyone should apply that. I think we all owe it to ourselves to take some time to
Mhm.
put our cores together and at least,
Yeah.
put them up. And because I mean, I think that's a good exercise. As you were talking about, I'm thinking like, what are my core values? You know
Mhm.
them, you apply them, but really to write them down may be a little more difficult than people think. And frankly, to your point, intentional stuff, you have to be, truly into this, and it's gonna make a difference in your life and everybody else around. And I think your concept now is on the road to help others to really find, their core values and change for better, and ultimately change their lives. I mean,
Mhm.
when you work with leaders, for example, I mean, you are transforming them
Mhm.
to really become better. And if they are better, they're definitely going to impact everybody else around them in a better
Yeah.
way. And therefore, the outcomes are all positive. So, really, it's like you're addressing the core stuff, like, at the source. And if you get everything treated at the source, everything else becomes purified and easier to absorb, and life becomes peachy. And that's what we want. So, I mean, really, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful. Listen, I enjoyed this discussion, and I've learned quite a bit as well, but also I admire the work that you do because you are transforming life. And, we all can use transformation at any given moment. Sometimes we get dull, we get a little rusty, and we need
Yeah.
sometimes these are the talks, believe it or not, they just kind of like reignite your inside. Like, all these things like that are hidden, like they come out. Oh, okay. Now it's like almost like you trigger them again. And it makes a
Mhm.
big difference in stuff. And I think everybody watching and listening, you can apply every single thing you've
Oh,
heard
yeah.
today in a personal life. And if you got through the whole show, you probably can apply a lot of this stuff in real business, and
Mhm.
identifying your own personality and your style also can make a difference on how to operate with people. Even if you didn't go to training, I think you defined it well enough that everybody can understand what that looks like for themselves. They can just ask the question. They can define, are they really a D or C or an I, or, so it makes a big difference, right? So thank you for that. Now, your work is not confined to Virginia or North Carolina, right? So it's you're pretty much worldwide open. I mean, how does that work, and how can
Absolutely. If you
people?
have if you have a camera and are willing to meet on Zoom or through my Kajabi or whatever, we can meet. And I do workshops. I teach inside of membership programs, and I do stuff plenty locally. But I do a lot of my work is right here on Zoom. So I'm happy to work with people, and you can do that you can work with me in many different ways.
Now the workshops are just individuals or like groups or I mean or you do like different coaching. How does that work? And just so we can give people some idea of the dynamics.
Sure. Well, I have a digital course that you can do for core values. I have a hybrid coaching program that I'm kind of testing out still to see if I want to stick with it just being one-on-one or if I want it to be group coaching. And that's where you take the digital course and I meet with you after each one and work with you specifically on that because 100% of the people that I work with think they know their core values going in, and 100% find out that they didn't know them. Now, they might know one, but they didn't. But when it comes to DISC, this is something that you can take on your own. You don't have to get my help with that. It is a 30-page report, but it is something that you can do. It's right there on my website. Or you can meet with me and I can give you a 90-minute debrief where we walk through it. It's got part of the report is a personal growth plan that you can actually work out your own plan if you're one of those DIs, maybe you're a go-getter yourself, right? And you want to do it yourself. But there's also coaching that goes along with that. I do executive leadership coaching. I have 6-month programs. I do workshops in person, and I also happy to fly, right? I grew up overseas. Flying is like candy for me. It's like I get on the plane and it's like, oh, that recycled air. So
How's it going?
yeah, so flying is no problem. But I do love walking in and actually helping people figure it out. But if you don't want to do that, I have some free resources that are very easy to get a hold of. If you go to my website, theintentionaloptimist.com, right above my head is a button that says free core values exercise. That's a great place to get you started. It's a 1-page PDF that will walk you through the process. If you look under tools and disk services, that's where you can get all of my other things. But you could contact me and we can work something out. I've got a conference coming up if you wanted to come into town for that, or I can come to you and do it. There's plenty of ways to work with me. And I love watching teams come together and transform. And I love helping leaders become everything they need to be. Because a lot of times we have responsibility with no authority. And once we figure out who we are, then we can actually act in our own authority, whether or not we get it from on high or not, right? We can actually make a difference. So if you feel like you're somebody who's consistently compromising, or you feel unsupported or stifled, maybe you feel unbalanced work and life, that fallacy that there's a work-life balance. If you're bored, right? If you're bored, or if you just feel really alone, these could be some real big signals that you might have some learning to do, some looking inside to do. And I'm happy to help you do it. I've been told, and it was one of the greatest compliments I've ever had, that I am a safe place to do that. And when a former employee comes running in your office and said in the middle of a panic attack and said you were the only person I knew to go to, so I said, all right, well, that's a privilege, and I like to do that for my clients. So I would love to. I would love to work with you guys.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm assuming industries doesn't matter because
Oh
this
no.
is really, it doesn't matter what your industry is. It's really just because these values are similar across the board. I mean, what you
Oh,
do is,
absolutely. I mean, I love working with female founders and CEOs just because women's leadership is kind of my big thing because I had to discover that on my own. But I spent a day in a law firm in Louisville in January, and I do work with the chamber, which means I work with all kinds of different industries. And all of this is transferable because this is you. This is not, I don't teach business tactics. I don't teach strategy. I can do a strategy session for you figuring out your personal growth. But what I work on is you and your team figuring out how you can best work together, figure out your strengths and how to mitigate weaknesses, make sure people are in the right seats. That's if there's any strategy I do, it's that. So there's no industry specific to this at all.
and again, that's personal growth, right? I mean,
Yep.
if you can grow yourself, in a leadership role, whenever it doesn't matter what level, but really it can make especially in a CEO, level
Oh,
or some
absolutely.
son who's in charge of or head of department. I mean, those are even like you said earlier, manager. I mean, there's by the way, that's the thing. People have these titles, top and bottom stuff, but managers, it's just a different capacity. I always refer to it like think about the military, right?
Mm,
Everybody is a soldier, a general and a private. They're
yes.
still soldiers. They still have the same abilities and training. It's just the ranking that makes a difference. I
Right.
use that also in reference in martial arts. I mean, you're a martial artist. I mean, obviously, no sensei or professor is a higher
Mm.
ranking officer, and people have different, collar belts, to get there. Even the black belts, they have different,
Right.
levels, but it's all ranking, and but at the end of the day, we're all in the same, kind of concept. The same thing in corporate. So it doesn't matter what rank you have in a corporate. It's just a matter of learning how to operate at your own scale, and sometimes it's also managing up and down. So you know,
Oh, yeah.
CEOs have boards, right, that they report to, and the boards have the government, and there's always somebody that's actually overseeing somebody, and so it's just a matter of understanding how those dynamics work and how to operate. And I love again your concepts are really true, and they can work with everybody. And sometimes we need those experts in our lives to share with us, the little tools, because we all think we know it all.
Yep.
Unfortunately, as a humans, I'm full, and we're never gonna get full enough. And there's always something we can learn from any. I mean, you listen to the show, you're gonna pick a couple of things, and in a different show, you're gonna keep, and it's not enough. If you go to the course, you're gonna get some more. And sometimes, even when you do go to the course, a couple of years later, you refresh again because we tend to forget things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I knew that stuff. Okay, well, sometimes it's just like you got to keep up, otherwise you lose the skills, right? So it's that kind of thing. Well, Andrea, we've exceeded our hour a long time ago, but it was all good. Yeah, I mean, I owe it to you. I mean, last time I had to cancel on you, but
That's
as you know,
okay.
I was at the hospital. I couldn't do anything about it. Something that we didn't plan for. Thank God everything's good, and that was a good one. I appreciate your patience and your kindness too, because I mean, sometimes people may not give you the same, what you gave me that day was also good. I mean, you made me feel good about not being, as opposed to making me feel bad, you made me feel good about, like, it's okay. Mom is first. So that was a good thing. But now I understand you also care about your mom. So you
Yeah.
know how that is.
Yeah.
uh, but thank you. And again, that comes from your core values as well. So
Mhm.
totally, totally appreciate it. Any last words of wisdom to share with our audiences today?
Don't be afraid to know yourself. I start every workshop with, why don't we do this work more often? And invariably, somebody says, because we're afraid. There's nothing inside you that you're going to discover for personal growth or leadership that's bad. They're just not. There are no leadership skills called narcissism or disrespect. They're just not. The stuff you're going to discover about yourself is good, and it's going to help you and it's going to help others. So be willing to look inside, be willing to think for yourself, and be willing to say, this sounds so, I am worth it. It sounds crazy, but a lot of times we think that somebody else has to tell us what to do when the answers are really in there and we just need to uncover them. So just be willing to uncover them.
Andrea, you just throwing a little bit of a twist in there. Kind of like, what about ego? I mean, ego gets a little bit into play, for a lot of leadership. That's a tough one.
But nobody says ego is a good thing, right? Does anybody say ego is a core value? Right? I had one person try to tell me control was a core value.
Yeah.
And I said, no, we're going to dig deeper. And, that is a particular coaching situation that didn't work out really well. And her company was paying me to coach. And, we got to the end. I'm like, this is not going to happen. They're not interested in growing. And because to say that control was a core value was completely missing the point of what it was she wanted to control. And so, going deeper, it would have been easy to figure out the control wasn't a core value.
It's
Yep.
funny, Andrea. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
There is no control. That's the thing.
right. Number one,
It's a perception that we have. There is no true control. No one has control or anything.
yeah,
At
it's a
any given moment, things can change on any one of us. A
yeah.
split second, and
And so I'm like, no, what you value is order. What you value is predictability. What you value is like I just started rattling off all these things because I could see, because she was clinical director. I could see all these things, and I'm like, control is not your core value. I know, but it's above all of those things. No, that's what you. It's a fear of lack of control. Therefore, what you're looking for is all of these other things. So when we start looking, nobody's going to look inside and say, ah. Greed is good. I have a big ego, right? They're just not going to do that. That's not real. People just don't do that. So I'm going to stand by my statement. You're not going to
Oh, no,
find anything. If there's something in there that needs to change, we'll figure it out. You'll notice it.
well, thank you. And again, I mean, it is a perception, that again we talk about power trip and it's
Yeah.
about me, but any good leader would never be about
No.
themselves. A good
No.
leader is that captain that actually goes with the ship,
Yep.
and I think a true leader would always, the team first. They push the team. They don't pull the
Yeah.
team, and that's or they just wait and like, hey, you do this, you're part of the team and you make it happen. So, but thank you. So that was great. See, you got a sample of what would be looking like, if you had a coaching right now. So you would have been easily, persuaded that that would not be the right way. So thank you for giving us. That was a little demo right there. All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for being with
Yes.
us and for sharing a lot of great stuff today. I mean, we could spend another hour easily. I know your time is valuable as well, so I've already taken enough. But thank you so much. And folks, again, hope you've enjoyed this session. A lot of good nuggets to take home. Do reach out to Andrea. The website will be in the description of the show, so click on it. Do your little, exercise. Press that button if you want to at least get some stuff going. And then definitely, if you are a corporate, a person, or you're in the head department that wants to maybe train some leaders, and or you have some new management that are being in training, this could be a couple of sessions that can make a difference in,
Mm.
because if you invest time, and I always believe this, if you invest time in training and you're see, a lot of times we do basic training, you know product training, like process training and stuff, but we forget the real core training of the core values of the personality, the leadership skills and things like that.
Right.
Because if you can, convert and make people, really see what they can do and see their value and how they can be better and also help them improve themselves, you're going to get far more results, no matter what you do. So again, just something to bear in mind. You can take it from both of us. We've done this, a bunch. I mean, Andrea does this for a living today, and I've
Yeah.
done some of that as well in my career path. And it's always important to be that person, that mentor. And again, if you're not, resources. Andrea is a
Yeah.
resource that can literally help make a difference. All right, that being said, I'm Hurricane H. We'll be talking soon. New day, new show, new topic. Bye for now.